Hello and welcome back to another video. So in this one we'll be covering a sort of a different topic and a different format. So we're talking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and more specifically the airstrike slash missile strikes slash whatever hit the hospital last night. So we're seeing a lot of different theories and so on. And this is a major development that has a huge impact on how this war will go on in the future. Therefore, I decided that this is something that I need to research, dwell into, see what actually did this, because if we find out who did it and see what actually happened, then we will get to a completely different point in this war, because the international support from Western countries that Israel has had throughout this conflict would quickly diminish if they are found to be guilty, and if the Palestinians did this to themselves, which the Israelis claim, then this is a huge hit on their support from the rest of the world. So we are going to see here what the two sides says about what happened and exactly what we can derive from that. But first off, what actually happened? So we see a strike on the Ahli hospital in Gaza. It's a small hospital which at the time, according to information, it had about 5,000 civilians present at the time of the strike. And the claim is that there's more than 500 fatalities from that strike. We have this video here to show exactly what happened. And we see here there was a major strike. The initial explosion was big, and then there's the fire from the cars which were in the parking lot. And we see the emergency workers working in the area, and they were carrying out different stuff and so on. This is the video from the New York Times. So based on this, we see that there was a major strike. The initial explosion was big, but what followed was a fire between the cars. So this is clear evidence that this was the actual strike, as we will see later on. We then move on to what came after. As soon as this happened, essentially the whole world started accusing Israel, because that is the logical step. When a Gaza hospital is struck, we would assume it is Israel, because it is the Israelis launching massive airstrikes 24/7 in Gaza. At some point they claimed that they launched over 100 airstrikes within a single hour. So with that many airstrikes happening in Gaza, it is normal to assume at some points they will hit a hospital or something of that caliber. So this is what happens. The world started accusing Israel. Now Israel was in a situation where they are being accused of causing this catastrophe, which essentially leads to major international implications against their cause, their support, and so on. So what is their self-defense? The first one is as seen in these two videos. Let's look at the first one first. We see that there was a rocket which the Palestinians had launched, which was flying in the air, then suddenly it switched directions, and then it blows up mid-air. So their explanation is that what happened was that this missile blew up mid-air due to a failure, and then the shrapnel fell down and caused this explosion. In the second video, we see another missile strike. It is claimed that this is the same. The reason why we see only one missile on the first one and multiple missiles on the second one is due to, at some point when the missile is launching, it stops with the burner because the trajectory and everything is already on. So one of the missiles had its engine continue combusting, and then at some point it changed directions and so on. While all the others already had their fires off, and as such, they stopped. They were already flying on the momentum. So this is the Israeli claim. It is a failed rocket by the Palestinians that ended up hitting their own hospital. So the shrapnel from a single missile is what caused this major explosion and all of these fatalities. The second part is this video here, which shows satellite imagery and drone footage of the explosion and what happened after as their self-defense. So essentially the argument here is that the explosion was small, there was a fire, this can be caused by shrapnel, and there's no crater. If there's no crater, it's not them, because their bombs cause craters in the ground, as we see here, diameter of 7 meters, diameter of 19 meters, based on the bombs that they've used. Then what is the Palestinian counter-argument? Because at this point, they have made a pretty good case. Israelis say that it is a failed Palestinian rocket that did it, so it is the Palestinians' fault, and they remove their own fault by showing that there's no crater. If there's no crater, it's not them, because they use heavy weapons. So what is the Palestinian counter-argument to this? The first one is that they claim and talk about the sound you will hear here. That was the sound of a missile, of the Palestinian missile. This is a US practice of a bombing using the JDAM system. The JDAM system is for targeting, meaning it is accuracy. And if you listen to this, you can see the sound is very similar between the US practice and the explosion, but not when it comes to the missile. The missile makes a much smaller sound than in the US practice and in this explosion that happened by the hospital. So essentially, based on the sound, the Palestinians are claiming that this is a Israeli bomb because they use the same as the United States. Not because both use the JDAM, because that's a targeting system. It has nothing to do with the sound of the explosion. But it means that it is a bomb dropped by the Israeli Air Force due to the sound. So they claim that the sound means that it is an Israeli bomb. As for how there's no crater, they claim if it is an explosion between 300 and 600 pounds, then there doesn't necessarily have to be a crater, and the surrounding buildings doesn't need to be as damaged as the Israelis claim they need to be. So essentially the bomb is small enough to have caused such a small explosion in comparison. Essentially what they're saying is that the Israelis didn't want to blow up the whole hospital, they just want to scare people off, because they are wanting them to evacuate from the northern parts of Gaza where this hospital is located. The Israelis have warned the Palestinians to leave this hospital twice, and they still haven't, and therefore they launched a bomb that is small to scare them off. And then they used that small bomb to claim it was a Palestinian rocket that failed. So that is the Palestinian first argument. Then we have the second argument, which is a different perspective. We see this video here, which is from the same missile strike at the same time, at the same point, but from a different perspective. And from this we see that the rockets are flying to the eastern parts, to the right side, and the explosion is happening in the center. So the missiles are not firing from or in the direction of the explosions, but in the opposite direction, essentially. And this is all due to a different perspective. From the first one, it looked like they were flying in the same direction. But from this perspective, it looks like they're flying in a completely different direction. So they're saying, well, from this perspective, it is clear that it's not a Palestinian rocket. And based on this perspective, it does seem that the Palestinian rockets flew in a different direction from the hospital and thus from these explosions. And if it flew from a different direction, there's no way it could simply just go from this direction and then suddenly go around and fly over here, because it would need the engine, the afterburner, to show the missile, because this missile would be shown the whole distance, because if the engine stops working, then there's no way the rocket could change directions. So essentially, it is not a Palestinian rocket from this perspective. And that is the Palestinian second argument. They have a third one as well. And that is that the explosion was too big to be a Palestinian rocket. Because we see here in this video what a Palestinian rocket strike looks like. Notice how the sound is similar, and here how can an explosion, a direct rocket strike, essentially cause nothing, but somehow shrapnel from a Palestinian rocket can blow up the whole hospital. That is their third argument. We then move on to the next part, which is the geolocation of these strikes. So we all know that this is actually the hospital strike and not some other strike. The explosion from the video matches with the double explosion, the first one and then the second one. And we see from all those videos that this matches. And based on one of the videos, we do the geolocation from different sources. I'll link them in the comments. But yeah, essentially we see based on this that this was the actual hospital hit. So in conclusion, there's no definitive evidence that either side has done it so far. Both can be guilty of this crime against humanity and war crime, which it is, but we don't have the evidence needed to accuse either side so far. I just needed to make this video to make sure that rather than the ones who spread lies and defame a certain side, we see that the reality is that although you can disprove your own guilt, in the end, the truth will always prevail, and at some point we will find out who is guilty of this, and when it happens, they shall be punished accordingly. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.